to George Music for All Four Seasons. We have Mr. Anthony Colatrella here with us. You're familiar with the original Jersey Boy. We had an interview with him a few months back. But our special guest today is Mr. Charles Calello, one of the great musicians and music arrangers in the music industry. In Mr. Calello's career, he has been involved in over 100 recordings that have made the Billboard chart list, and 38 of those that have made the top 10. He has worked with the likes of Frank Sinatra, Barbra Streisand, Ray Charles, Engelbert Humperdinck, Roberto Carlos, Neil Diamond, Laura Nyro, Paul Anka, Barry Manilow, Juice Newton, Ronnie Milsap, Willie Nelson, and the great Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons. And I know I left a few names out. But Mr. Calello, I want to thank you for taking the time. We just want to talk to you about your great career. And again, this is just coming from a real fan of yours right here, your involvement with the Four Seasons. And when you're ready to end this, we will end it. But before we do, just to show out to the folks out there, this is one of the albums that I'm not sure if you can see it. It's not coming up, is it?
No.
No, okay. Anyway, Mr. Calello was on the Working My Way Back to You album. He came out on the front cover of the Golden Hits album. And anyway, Mr. Calello, go ahead. How about just sharing the early years of your career with the Four Lovers? And
well, firstly, it's not Mr. Calello, it's Charlie.
Charlie.
I will call.
Or as they say in Jersey, it's Charlie.
Charlie.
I will call you Charlie, but I love Mr. Calello. Charlie.
Charlie down neck.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So what is it that you want to know?
Well, I purchased a couple copies of your book you put out a few years ago. That was great. And you meeting Frankie Valli in some nightclub, chatting for hours till like 3, 4 in the morning. Apparently he's the individual that got you started in your career. Just a few minutes of that. And when you got into with the Four Seasons and working with the Four Seasons, how was it working with one of the top bands of the 1960s?
Well, when I started working with Frankie, I was probably around 20 years old.
Wow.
He came into a club and heard my band. Mm-hmm. And he had heard about our band because we were from a musical high school.
Arts High.
There was a high school in New Jersey that was the first one in the country. It was a music and arts high school called Arts High. And all the musicians from Essex County and the surrounding area went to this school. So there were numerous musicians that were really, really talented. And as a result of that school, it got me motivated to do what I eventually did. So as we worked with each other in school, there was a band that was formed, and I became part of the band. And after high school, although I went to Manhattan School of Music, I started to play in clubs with the band. And soon the musicians in Newark heard our band, and because we were really different. We did all the things that the other bands didn't know how to do because we were all musicians. We sang in 4-part harmony like the Four Freshmen. Instead of ad-libbing doo-wop songs, we worked out songs where we sang. We had a great singer. We also had horns, which most of the bands had just guitars and a keyboard. And although we were not very commercial, we were respected by the musicians. And that's how I met Frankie, through this band.
Oh, interesting. Now, how soon? Okay, now how long were you in the Four Lovers?
I was with the Four Lovers for maybe a little over a year.
Oh, wow.
And while I was with them, we recorded the song Come Si Bella.
Ah, yes.
Come Si Bella was written by Carmen De Palma and myself. Carmen had cerebral palsy, and he was known in Newark because all the musician kids that went to Arts High. He also went to Arts High, and he was a lot of fun to hang around with. So he called me, and he had written a song, and he didn't know how to finish it. So I helped him finish the song, and he and I actually wrote the song, and I brought it to Frankie and Tommy. And because it was an Italian type of song, Tommy said, "Well, let's record it and change the name." So we recorded it as the Romans.
Romans. Did you play and sing on the record, Charlie?
Yeah, I played bass and sang on it.
And you did the arrangement on it?
Well, we sort of did the arrangement sort of head style, like we would actually ad lib the harmonies. It wasn't like it was really schooled. Where with the other band, we used to write the parts out and read them, but none of the musicians. Tommy didn't read music. Frankie didn't read music, and also Hank Majeski, who was also with the group at that point, he didn't read either.
Okay. Now you were very instrumental in the sound of the Four Seasons, especially during their dawn era, and then again after that. Now, how much participation from the Four Seasons were involved in their actual recordings? Nick Massey, Gaudio, DeVito.
Well, when you listen to the Four Seasons, the sound of Bob Gaudio, Tom DeVito, Nick Massey, and Frankie Valli was unique. Nicky was really amazing with background vocals, and Nicky did the background vocal arrangements. And my job was to take care of the music, what the band played, and to come up with ideas and help them get and put the pieces together. Now, once Nicky left the group, the whole sound of the band changed because he was a main ingredient in doing background parts, and secondly, his voice was a different texture than mine. So when I sang on "Let's Hang On," the sound of the Four Seasons changed. And then when I left and Joe Long came along, they became like a new Four Seasons. But the early group, the sound of the Four Seasons was really the four of them. Now when Dawn came around, that was the first time that I actually made the entire record. I actually formatted the record, used the right instrumentation, wrote all the parts out without having to do it in piecemeal. And from Dawn Go Away on, up until 1966, until working my way back to you, a lot of the records that they made were actually dominated by what I knew as a musician. And when it came to Let's Hang On, I wrote out all the vocal parts, all the musician parts, all the parts. And Denny Randall went to Atlantic City where they were working and taught them the parts, and they came back and sang it.
In your book, you made the comments that Bob Crewe's instructions to you were to make a record that combined Motown with the Rolling Stones.
Yeah, so the Rolling Stones had that great sound on Satisfaction.
Yeah.
And Motown had that
of it.
So taking Let's Hang On, the bass line was and then the guitar, the fuzz guitar was down do it was like a down do boo dee boo doo. But I don't really remember. But the sound of the guitar was like the Rolling Stones. The rhythm was like the Motown record, and then the fact is that we used horns on the record that also sort of shaped it like a Motown record. And then there were a whole slew of records that actually fit that format. There was Let's Hang On, Working My Way Back to You, Opus 17, and the style remained all the way up until about 1969.
Got it.
I think you've mentioned that a guitar sound on Let's Hang On was actually a combination of two guitars.
It was actually it was a bass guitar,
Yeah.
a bass guitar that played the lick, but it had the fuzz tone and everything like that. The whole idea was to try to make them sound like they belonged on a radio.
And it
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Anthony.
I guess, yeah. When I would see the Four Seasons in concert, of course, Tommy DeVito would play that part, and it sounded nothing like on the record. So I think, and I think most people by now know this, but there was always that misconception that it was actually the Four Seasons, Tommy and Nicky, who were playing on the records, but clearly they were not, right? Crewe and you had a set group of studio musicians who played on those records.
From Dawn Go Away on, we only used studio musicians. They didn't play on the records anymore.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. From Dawn forward. Okay.
So after Ragdoll, after they did Ragdoll by themselves.
Yes. Yeah.
With them playing the instruments, and then everything else that followed were really all studio musicians. Buddy Salzman was the drummer. Lou Morrow played bass. Stan Free was the keyboard player.
Yeah.
Ralph Casal, Vinnie Bell,
Al Gorgoni.
Several other guitar players. That was usually the rhythm section. And my father played trumpet.
Trumpet, yeah.
Yeah.
That was the question I have. You say that your father played the trumpet in Big Girls Don't Cry.
Right.
But the original Big Girls Don't Cry appeared on the Sherry album, the first album, and you were not actually involved with the album. Was that re-recorded then for the Big Girls Don't Cry album?
No, they actually called my father to play on the record.
Oh.
Oh, okay.
So my father actually he played on a hit record before I did.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. Interesting.
They knew my father played trumpet because they when we were making records with Bob Crewe, although I didn't use my father to make those records, they knew my father played trumpet, so all they had to do was call my house.
I think he continued to play right up to 1969, I think.
Right, he played on Sweet Caroline too.
Oh, your dad did?
Yeah.
Oh, that I did
when
not
I
know.
made the Sweet Caroline record, the bum bum bum, my father played that. In fact, I still have the horn he played it on.
Oh, wow. Can you share a little bit about that session and your relationship with Neil Diamond?
Not very good.
There was really no relationship. Actually, they called me, and I was really the wrong person.
Yeah.
When Frankie did "Can't Take My Eyes Off You," I was working at Columbia Records, and I wasn't allowed to do outside dates. The arranger who wrote the arrangement was Artie Schreck, who I went to high school with. Now, in 1965, I brought Artie to New York. He was living in Lake Tahoe, and started to work him into making records with me. So as a result of him being on my records, he learned the style, and he learned how to write, and learned how to make the records that he could duplicate the sound. So because he was in the neighborhood, he was one of the guys, and was also brilliantly talented. When I went to Columbia Records, Schreck was the one who picked up the ball during that period of time. So now what happens, Tom Catalano, who produced one of the producers on Sweet Caroline, said that Neil wanted to use the arranger that did Can't Take My Eyes Off You. By that time, Artie was no longer living in New York. He had retired. Not really retired, but he had moved away, and he stopped doing music for a while.
Yeah.
So he called me thinking that I did Can't Take My Eyes Off You. So,
Wow.
so when I made the record, it was really, they hired the wrong guy.
Wow. But I'll tell you though, that one little signature part, that bump, 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 my God, that is so popular. I mean, that to me, that was very important in that song. I can't imagine the song without that.
Yeah, that's the signature sound of the song.
Yeah.
Well,
Hey.
what's funny about it is that I mean, here it is, over 60 years since the Four Seasons. And when I talked to somebody, I said, well, what have you done? I said, well, I worked with the Four Seasons. Who are they?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, wow.
And so then I say, and I also did Sweet Caroline. You did Sweet Caroline? So
Bum, bum, bum. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
there you go.
But
So,
despite the tremendous success of that song, Neil Diamond, you never arranged anything for him again, right?
I never heard from him again, never spoke to him, never saw him since 1969. And here it is, 2025.
wow.
You think it was fate that Gaudio and Neil Diamond got together in terms of personalities?
Uh, I don't really know. I know Gaudio is very talented, and for him to have worked with Neil Diamond, I know he was, he was very important at a certain point in his life. But even though I made records with the Four Seasons and with Neil Diamond, when they worked together, I didn't have anything to do with those records.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, okay. Charlie, can you share a little bit about what I consider a masterpiece of an album that you worked on with Frank Sinatra and Bob Gaudio, Watertown?
Well, what was interesting about doing that record, it was 19. That was also recorded in 1969. I was 31 years old.
Oh, wow.
And taking into consideration that the Four Seasons had a hit record, but beside the Four Seasons, I also had produced the Name Game for Shirley Ellis, the Clapping Song. I had a #1 hit record with Lou Christie, Lightning Strikes.
Yeah.
And I also had several other chart records in between. So in 1969, although I was early in my career, Frank Sinatra, who was an avid reader of the trade magazines, had some idea as to who was going to do the record. So I never met him. Gaudio had gotten the keys from him, and I went to Gaudio's house and wrote the arrangements at Gaudio's house in Montclair. And when it came time to do the recording, I never expected Sinatra to show up. Back then, we were able to make the tracks. Later on, the singers would come in. But the night of the session, 7 o'clock on a button, I started the orchestra, and I started conducting, and I was playing the first arrangement. And as I was playing the arrangement, the way I explained it was all of a sudden the air in the room changed.
Yeah.
And something I couldn't explain. And Sinatra had entered the studio from the back. So when he walked in, I didn't see him. He walks up and I have the orchestra in front of me, and he walks up, and I'm on a podium that's maybe about maybe 20 inches off the ground, and he taps me on the leg, and as I'm conducting, and he says, "You Calello?" I turned around to say hello to him, and there was Frank. I went to talk to, nothing came out of my mouth. I said, "Oh, what did you get yourself?" Oh, he said, what are you doing here? I was so intimidated. I can't put it into words. But the fact was, growing up with his music, being a fan of his music, and studying his arrangers over the years, that's how I learned to become an arranger. So here I am standing on the backs of his arrangers, arranging a record for him, feeling very insecure that your other guys should really be doing this.
Right.
So after after he heard the arrangement, and I walked into the control room, and he said to me, "Nice chart, Charlie." And then I started to feel more comfortable. But it was the experience alone was really, really amazing.
I I can only imagine. I can only imagine. How about sharing a little bit of your involvement with the Genuine Imitation Life Gazette by the Four Seasons?
That was also another record we did about the same time, and I don't have too much of a
Okay.
recollection of making the record, other than I went to Gaudio's house and sat with Gaudio as I wrote the arrangements. The thing that actually stuck in my mind on a lot of these projects was if the records were hits, because I'd hear them on radios, and they would stay in my brain, and I'd hear them periodically, so the memory of them lasted a lot longer. But seeing that there were really no hits from that record, I can't tell you one title that came off the record.
Okay.
Because
Okay.
usually I'd make the records and I'd never really listen to them again.
Oh, I see. Okay. Okay.
Because taking into consideration, while you work on a record, that becomes the most important part of your life. After it's finished, the next project becomes the most important part of your life.
Yeah.
So you start concentrating on the new direction. And very rarely did I make a record where I did the entire album that I actually remembered.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Interesting. Okay. Well,
All right.
look at back in '65, you get a call from Tommy DeVito regarding Nick Massey leaving the group, and he asked you to join. I believe you were with the Four Seasons band for about a year, played over 100 concerts. Now, in the Four Lovers, it was when you left the Four Lovers, Nick Massey came in. In the Four Seasons, Nick Massey left, and then you came in. How
Well,
was? Go ahead.
actually, when I left the Four Seasons, when I left the Four Lovers, because I became a Four Lover in
1958.
I think it was around 1960.
Oh, okay.
1958 when you became a Four Lover, John.
Was 58?
Yeah, 58.
Okay. So now when I left the Four Lovers, I got Carlo Chesky to replace me.
Oh, there's
Now, very, very few people know this. Carlo Chesky was a bass player that went to Arts High School. Now, when Carlo Chesky left the group, Nick Massey replaced Carlo Chesky, and when Hank Majeski left the group, Bob Gaudio replaced him. So
Right.
that happened during that period of time.
Yeah,
So
that was 1959.
Yeah,
so now
interesting.
1959, I believe, is when the Four Seasons started to work with Bob Crewe.
Right. Yeah. Late 59, 60.
And I was working with my I went back with my old band, and I started to write arrangements for Bob Crewe. Originally, Mike Petrillo was the one they were using to write arrangements, but it got to be a little bit too complicated. And he was the one that said to Frankie, he said, Charlie's going to be back in town. Why don't you call Charlie? Charlie could write these. So Frankie called me, and I started to write the arrangements. And the first record that I wrote the arrangement on was An Angel Cried.
Right.
Which was recorded by
Hal Miller and the Rays. Hal Miller
and the Rays.
The Rays
who had a couple of hit records before that.
Silhouette.
So we started to make records about that time. So although I knew the Four Lovers repertoire, when the Four Seasons were performing, they were still doing a lot of the songs that they did with the Four Lovers.
Mm-hmm.
So now when Tommy called me, he knew I knew the hit records because I made the hit records.
Yeah.
And also I was there giving them their parts on the record, which said, okay, now you come in with the then you hear the that's not my note. It was this guy. Then I was the one that had to remember everybody's part to give them the parts as they were recording. So
Wow.
I knew the background parts and also the hit records.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when I went to work with the Four Seasons,
Yeah.
I hadn't played bass in 5 years.
Oh my
So I
God.
didn't even own a bass. So uh, the night I showed up, I was really supposed to be in Atlantic City with my wife and kids.
Yes.
And I saw them perform, and evidently there was bad blood between Nikki and the group. And
Wow.
but the real reason why Nikki left is in my book.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, we've read it.
Yes. It's
And
in there.
Not
so
so.
I mean this he told me, so I know it's true. So,
Right. Wow.
so the thing about it, Tommy said, sit in the audience and listen to the songs and see the ones that you need to rehearse. So they did one more concert with Nikki. So I said to Nikki, I said, Nikki, I don't even own a bass. So he left me his bass and also his shirts or his sweaters that he wore with the band. So we were about the same size.
Yeah.
So I went on I joined the Four Seasons, and we rehearsed in a car driving from Allentown, Pennsylvania, or wherever we were in Pennsylvania, to Ohio, where we were going to do this concert
Columbus, Ohio.
at a
State
at
Fair.
a racetrack,
Fair. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
and there were 10,000 people there, and
Wow.
that's when the three of them got arrested and went to jail.
Yeah. So you have to bail them out.
I had to bail them out. This is the first gig.
Wow. Arrested, thrown in jail. The 3 seasons. Boy, I could only imagine Bob Gaudio dealing with that. I
Well,
mean,
he was arrested once before, although they don't mention. He was arrested once before for something similar.
oh, really? Oh,
Yeah, when he was with the Royal Teens.
oh,
So
okay. Okay, so there's a little
so
history
so
there.
so so although he portrayed himself, in Jersey Boys as someone who was like Lily White,
Yeah.
Yeah.
he had experienced that once before.
Right,
But
right.
it was really funny, um, because I really didn't want to be on the road and be a Four Season.
You didn't.
No,
No.
Wow.
my career was in motion as an arranger, and my goal was to be an arranger producer, which is
Right.
which is what I did all my life. And as far as making records, it was something that I enjoyed. And being on the road and being a Four Season and doing that, it didn't really appeal to me. So I eventually replaced myself.
Oh, okay, okay. But touring again with one of the biggest bands at the time. I mean, the concerts, the fans. Can you just share just a little bit of that? The craziness that went on. I mean, anything that stands out?
Well, we were not the kind of band that the crowds ran after.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
we we would work pretty regularly, and we'd go on the road, do 2, 3 dates, come back, do another 2, 3 dates a couple of weeks later, and pretty much we would fly every place. And we had Tommy's brothers were the road people
Yeah.
that carted the instruments, so they would drive every place with the drummer,
Oh,
and
okay.
we would fly, and occasionally we'd have to drive if the next venue was close enough.
Okay.
So then on numerous occasions we had our own plane that we flew. We used to rent a four engine Comanche, no, a 2 engine Comanche that was a 6-seater, and the four of us used to fly with the pilot.
Yeah.
And the pilot was the brother of the saxophone player who produced the Gary Lewis and the Playboy record,
Oh,
which was written by Al Cooper.
Yeah. Diamond Ring, this Diamond Ring.
Yeah.
oh, interesting.
So he knew that, that we were a band, and he had experience from his brother, experienced pilot. He owned the plane, maintained the plane, and we used to fly out of Newark Airport.
Yeah.
So occasionally we would fly commercially, but mostly we flew the private
Right,
plane.
right. But again, touring with the Four Seasons, that band, it just wasn't for you. You wanted to get back into the studio, it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean there were some things that were really beneficial with going on the road. First of all, wherever we went, we stayed in the best places. We were treated exceptionally well. And
Nice.
it was sort of like, you go on stage for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and the rest of it was really a lot of fun. We
Yeah,
were kids traveling, living
that's
in
great.
hotels and everything. I mean, it was fun.
Yeah.
But the strange part about it is that while I was doing that, I was still making records. And
Mm.
on one of the occasions, I flew back while they stayed on the road, and I had to fly back to New York because I was doing a Bobby Vinton session. I flew back. The session finished at 5 o'clock. From Columbia 30th Street to Newark Airport, I figured would take me an hour. It was a 2-hour plane ride to Ohio. I met the private plane. It flew me back to the gig that we had in Ohio, but we hit a thunderstorm that you couldn't believe. The plane was bouncing around in the sky. I didn't think that the plane could withstand what was going on. And as a result of it, it slowed us down. And I got to the venue when they were supposed to go on at 8 o'clock. And I figured I would just about, or 8 or 8:30. So at 8 o'clock, the promoter wanted them to go on. And Charlie wasn't there. So they had walked out on stage, and they were just about to play the first number when I arrived with my bass in hand and played the first number.
Wow.
And after the show, I said to them, I really can't do this. I said, this is, it's really not working. So that's when I decided I was really going to leave.
Got it. Got it. Interesting. Go ahead, Anthony.
I was gonna say, earlier you did, I'm sort of jumping ahead a little bit here, but you did allude to leaving the Four Seasons, and I guess that was after the Working My Way Back to You album in early '66. And you wanted to do your own producing, and you went to Columbia, and
Yes.
you did produce a landmark album while you were there. So maybe you could tell us about that experience.
Yes.
Going to Columbia Records was an experience. It was the first time I had worked at a corporation, and Al Cooper expressed it very wisely about the people that worked for companies. Is in the morning they don't put their clothes on; they put themselves on.
Yeah.
And it was an experience and a half, because everybody up there was protecting their jobs, and I had never been in an environment like that. And the restrictions working at Columbia Records were unbelievable. First of all, we were used to operating the knobs in the control room to make sure that something was loud enough, and the engineers would allow us to do. We couldn't touch the knobs. The things that we wanted to do electronically, the engineers wouldn't do. So as I was getting frustrated, even though I had had a couple of chart records while I was there, I wanted to sign Valerie Simpson, who eventually wrote "Ain't No Mountain High."
Oh,
Ain't
wow.
Nothing Like the Real Thing, and they wouldn't allow me to sign her because
Oh, geez.
because I was white, and in no uncertain terms, they had a black producer, and the black producer took care of those kind of records,
Oh,
which really annoyed me, because those of us that made music didn't matter what you were. You know, you could be green and you could play and sing. Boy, you were on our team.
Right on, Charlie. Yeah.
So it was I had frustration with that. Then I recorded a song by the Rubber Band called "Let Love Come Between Us," which I put out. The record got no recognition. It was eventually recorded by James and Bobby Purifier and was a top 20 record.
Oh.
Then I signed Shirley Ellis, and they allowed me to sign Shirley Ellis only because she had a track record, yet they didn't promote the records.
Mm.
Then you also
Wow.
did Winchester Cathedral, I think.
Yeah, I did Winchester Cathedral.
Oh, wow, that was a huge one.
But they didn't pull the. But we could have had the entire country. We only had the Northeast. And then I recorded the Laura Nyro Eli album, which actually changed my life. It was I actually got fired after I made the record.
Oh my God. How do you get fired after making an album of that caliber?
That'll give you some idea. That'll give you some idea as to the people that ran it.
Yeah, they said Columbia makes money, not records, right? Something like that.
So in fact, they just released a new box set on her, which is amazing, of all the things that she's ever recorded. But working with Laura actually changed my life in the way that I actually started to make music from that point on. Up until that point, the kind of music that I made was pop music, which was sort of manufactured. And there was a big difference between the Four Seasons, the Beach Boys, and the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. Now, the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, they actually had a following that was very unusual because they actually had a fan base, a real fan base of kids that were dying to see them. They weren't waiting for us to get off the plane to see Frankie Valli or Tommy DeVito or that never happened.
Interesting.
So the group itself was sort of we were a pop band, no different than any other pop band that existed prior to us, like some of the bands that were successful before us. But what was interesting about the success of the Four Seasons, they had Bob Crewe and Bob Gaudio, who were brilliant writers, not good writers, brilliant writers.
Brilliant.
So now Laura Nyro now has that same talent. She's a brilliant writer. And I make the record, and I recognize as I'm making the record that these are not only great records or great songs, but they're works of art. These things are, I knew those things were going to outlive me. And the interesting part about the way Columbia Records looked at it, although they eventually got it, they were not in that particular mode at that particular time. Eventually they became part of that culture, but yeah. The first, Laura Nyro was like one of the first of those kinds of records that they made. But take into consideration, they already had Bob Dylan signed, Simon and Garfunkel. They had signed Blood, Sweat, and Tears, and they were starting to cross the boundary between Andy Williams, Tony Bennett, and the rock and roll business.
Yeah.
So when I got fired, it was sort of a blessing in disguise. And I went back to becoming an independent arranger, and I realized that my career just went on. It wasn't like I lost my work.
Oh, and how it went on. Oh my gosh.
And you know, I thank God that I was able to, you know, fulfill my life's dream of becoming an arranger and making a living and doing what I wanted to do all my life. So the thing that made the major change from doing the Laura Nyro record, I never made a record after that where I didn't put anything on the paper that I absolutely didn't commit to. In other words, if I put it on a paper, I knew it was going to reach my heart. And if it reached my heart, well, it may not reach yours, but it would reach Anthony's, it would reach this one, it would.
Right.
So what happened was I started to realize that the music that I was making had to invoke a feeling, because we all have feelings. You feel love, I feel it. You feel pain. You know, you feel, if your puppy died, or I have a cat. If something happened to the cat, I'd feel badly.
Sure.
So people have these emotions. If you can't stir the emotion out of a record, people are going to feel that it's real. A good example is when you look at My Eyes Adored You, which was the first record I made with Frankie. I didn't record the Four Seasons or Frankie for 5 or 6 years. That was the first record I made.
Wow.
When I wrote that arrangement, I wrote the arrangement thinking about myself back in high school. And if I was 40 years old, I was at that point about 30, I was about 35 at that point. If I ran into my high school sweetheart, I would at that age be able to tell her the things that I was too inhibited to say when I was a kid. And
right.
I said, if I could get that message across, and everything that went on that record tried to create the tenderness that existed from that period, and also manufacture it into the period that we were doing, and try to get that message across so that he could sell the song.
Yeah.
And from there on, every single record I made, I stamped it with this.
Yeah.
Wow. That is just so interesting. Go ahead, Anthony.
You bringing up My Eyes Adored You, that was recorded while the Four Seasons were still at Motown, which was, of course, the low point of their careers. And but it was at the Bob Crewe sessions at Media Sound Studios in New York City, where he brought you back and he brought Nick Massey back to record songs to try to get the Four Seasons career back on track.
I don't remember Nicky getting involved with the Four Seasons, because Gaudio was in California at that point. Nicky never moved out there. And after Swearing to God, Bob got hit by a car and he was incapacitated, and they wanted to finish the record, and Gaudio finished the record with the new Four Seasons, and that's when he recorded Oh What a Night in December '63. So
okay.
So I don't know how Nicky was even involved back then.
Well, this would have been like November, December of '73. This was before. You're talking about when they after Frankie had the success with My Eyes Adored You, then the Close-Up album with Swearing to God. This was before that. They were still at Motown. They hadn't had a hit record in several years. Motown wasn't even releasing their records, and Crewe hooked up with Kenny Nolan at that time and was determined to write them a hit record. So he city to record, and that's where My Eyes Adored You was recorded.
They recorded My Eyes Adored You in California, and Bob didn't like the record. And he came back, and he came to New York. So I didn't find this out until they did the research on the masters, and there was a master that they had recorded at Motown. So they had a multi-track on it in California. So what happened was, when they called me to make the record, the only thing I had as a reference was Kenny playing it on a piano. So all that stuff prior to that, I had no knowledge of, because I hadn't seen Frankie. I'll back up. I did see Frankie in concert, because I had quit the business for a while. And when I saw him, his band looked tired. There was like the 50% of the audience was gone. He was playing to empty houses. And when I actually saw this, I went to see one of the shows, and I actually had tears in my eyes, saying to myself, we went through all this, and look at the reality. I mean, it was really sad.
Yeah.
And then when I made the record with Frankie, I hadn't recorded with the Four Seasons in 5 years.
Right.
Oh, it's a while.
So this was the first record I made in 5 years. So whether you see the success behind the Four Seasons up to that point were 6 people.
Yeah.
Bob Crewe, Bob Gaudio, Frankie Valli, Charlie Calello, Sandy Linzer, and Denny Randall.
Ah,
Those were the 6 people. Now, Gaudio took the Four Seasons and took the 5 away. Well, he still had Frankie, so he took the 4 ingredients away. He wasn't writing with Bob Crewe. Then he started to write with Bob Crewe, and they started to make the records, but they didn't have Charlie Calello.
yeah, true.
So now, without Charlie Calello, Sandy Linzer, and Denny Randall, which had pulled him through that period of time, even after he wrote Can't Take My Eyes Off You, when you take into consideration, Can't Take My Eyes Off You was really a copy of the song Candy.
Oh,
Candy, I love my sugar candy. I love you, baby. Really quite all right. I love you, baby.
oh, that's interesting.
So what happened was Gaudio, although he was clever enough to put that together, Gaudio was sort of a little out of the pocket at that point. But if you notice when he came back with Oh What a Night in December '63,
Oh,
the
yeah.
man was there's no question about his brilliance. The man is brilliant in many ways. I learned a lot about arranging from him.
Oh, okay.
Even though he knew nothing about music, the way he formulated songs and the way he listened to records and what he was able to identify, he taught me how to analyze music. So here I was, his musical interpreter, who was interpreting his concepts. And in California, he had no one interpreting his concepts.
Wow. That made a big difference.
Made a major difference.
Yes.
Like Elton John trying to write songs without Bernie Taupin.
Right. Right.
You know, when you have a working, I'll give you an example. They needed an intro for Candy Girl. They were looking for the intro, and I went to the piano and I played Candy Girl. I played that chord progression. That chord progression was not something that musically they would have come up with.
Wow.
I voiced it. Bob Crewe heard it. He says, that's the start of the record. Now, little things like that were added to the records, which caught the ears and the way the records were put together. Taking into consideration all the hit records I had in the 70s. I did Southern Nights with Glenn Campbell. I did After the Lovin' with Engelbert Humperdinck. My Heart Belongs to Me with Streisand, Chez Chez La Femme,
Juice Newton.
the Juice Newton. All those records had to be not only something that you could relate to, but they had to be radio records. So
right.
What they taught me as an arranger, they taught me how to make radio records. So one of the ingredients with the Four Seasons during that period was taken out, but several of the ingredients. So Gaudio and Crewe were there left on their own trying to make the records. Yes, they could make records on their own. But at that point, the business had changed to such a degree that they didn't have the language to speak the musical thing that they needed. All of a sudden, Can't They? My Eyes Adored You came out, and suddenly the door opened.
Yep, and it sure did. One. I consider one of the greatest. I know Frankie Valli doesn't like the term comeback, but one of the greatest comebacks in music history. I mean, all the way up the charts with Valli and the band, the Four Seasons. Charlie, let me ask, and we'll be ending soon. We don't want to take too much of your time. With the 20th anniversary of Jersey Boys now, what are your thoughts on that play? Do you have any you'd like to share?
No.
Okay.
No, I wish them well with it.
Right.
I wish them well with it, but
okay.
The nice part about it for me, was the fact that opening night, I got to see all the people that participated in making us what we were.
Got it. Okay. Okay. Now, today, right now, do you have any conversations with Valli, Gaudio, or anybody from that you've worked with in the past? I mean, I'm referring to the Four Seasons band. Is it you guys still work together, or is there anything going on, or not much?
Last time I worked with Frankie was 2006 when we did the
Romancing the 60s. Yeah.
Romancing the 60s record. And that was the last time. That was the last time we worked together. And the sort of we moved on.
Okay. Okay.
I still
Okay.
regard Frankie as being the one that got me started in the business,
Very nice.
as the person that really was instrumental in giving me opportunity. I mean, I'll never forget that. I still regard Frankie as being very important in my life because he introduced me to my wife 44 years ago.
Oh,
And
great.
and we're still married, happily married.
Good
So
for
he
you.
played a major part in my life, and I played a part of his life, and so the two of us benefited throughout the years.
Right, right. Well, that's great. Well, I'm going to sum it up here. Anthony, do you have any more questions for Charlie?
Well, I have a whole bunch of other questions, but we don't want to, prolong it.
Well, if he's open to a
let me
couple
see.
more.
What do you want to know when you got me here?
Thank
Oh,
you,
all
Charlie.
right. Well, of course, your fame is as an arranger, but you've also been a producer, and you have written songs as well. Is there any song that you can recall that you actually wrote?
Well, one of the reasons why I stopped writing, or I only wrote partially, was because as an arranger, I worked for songwriters. So Burt Bacharach was a songwriter and a record producer, but he started as a songwriter and he arranged his own records. I started as an arranger, so if I wrote songs and I was trying to get my songs on the records, it really would not have worked positively for me. So if I wrote songs, I would write them with the producers on occasion. Sandy Lindsay and I wrote a bunch of songs, but from the writing of songs, unless they were successful, it was hard to remember the songs. After you write them, even if you record them, if they're not successful, they go in a drawer.
Well, we have to give you credit. You did write what was probably Frankie Valli's first hit solo record.
Right.
Hurt Yourself, right? You wrote that one.
Right.
Yeah.
Something to remember. You earlier you used the term when you left Columbia, it was a blessing in disguise. You actually wrote a song titled "Blessing in Disguise" for Hal Miller in the Rays.
Ah,
See, you know more about me than I know about me.
I didn't know that.
It's funny. It's funny. About 10 years ago, a fellow who attempted to write a book on me, did some research and found somebody who had collected over 700 songs that I had recorded.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
He put them in the MP3s and sent them to me. And I have there must be about 7 or 8 CDs that I have with all those records. So every now and then I'll put them on and I can say, yeah, I remember that. I don't even remember who sang it. I listened. The songs weren't a hit. I could know it's me because I could hear it on the record. But
Right.
I may not even remember the song or something. So if you don't being in this business and working on songs, it's what have you done lately that you really think about. So that's one of the reasons why I don't think about the songs in the past.
I don't know if that person who put all your songs, Ken Charmer, who
Yes.
interviewed you, he has a Facebook page which is called Charlie Calello Lost and Found, and he has just about every record you arranged on that, which is where
send me that. Send me that, please. I don't have that.
Oh, it's right on Facebook. It's a Facebook page.
I don't know how to use Facebook, so if you could tell me how to.
I could send you the link, Charlie.
Okay.
Yeah, where you could just
Right.
tap tap right onto it. It's really, really interesting. Really
Yeah,
interesting.
Here's one of the great intros to a record, in my opinion, is on Four Seasons Sunday Kind of Love, the intro of that song with the harmonies, with the seasons. As I was going across records you've arranged, there was a song, I believe it was from 1961, called Jane by Matthew Reed. It has the exact same intro. So it looks like either Crewe or you or both recycled that intro from Jane by Reed to the Four Seasons Sunday Kind of Love. It's a fantastic intro when the seasons do it in harmony.
Well, one of the things about arranging is that if it was on a record and I could remember it, I wouldn't use it again. But if it wasn't on a record, the probabilities would be strong that I'd recycle it. To give you an example of how sometimes you don't think about things, I had a hit record with the Lovers Concerto. It's the number one record.
Oh yeah.
If you listen to the intro after to go dun 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 boom dun 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 dun, that's Stop in the Name of Love. It was boom dun 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 dun. I had no idea I wrote it. I wrote it.
Wow.
Copied it note for note.
Interesting. That is interesting.
It happens because your mind doesn't just discard things sometimes.
Yeah, yeah.
How about Frankie's first solo record was "The Sun Ain't Gonna Shine Anymore," which is a tremendous song, but it was not at all.
Did you freeze, Anthony?
Yeah, he froze up.
Why was it a hit and not a hit, or why was it not a hit and then a hit? You have any?
It was a hit on the same label by the Walker Brothers.
Yeah, Smash. Yeah, Smash.
But if you listen to Frankie's record, you listen to Walker Brothers record, they're very similar in nature.
Yeah.
Very.
So what they did was they copied Frankie's record, and I have about 6 or 7 records that I did where I did the original records and they were copied. When I Need You, the Leo Sayer, When I Need You, that record, I made the original record on that, which was copied. Let me see. There are a few more that offhand I could remember. I just had to go dig into my archives.
Well, any more questions, Anthony?
I do have another question.
Go ahead.
After Candy Girl and the Four Seasons got into a dispute with VJ and they sort of went on strike and they refused to record any more records. And during that time, I think Frankie and let's see, I think it was just Frankie and you went and did a record for Al Kasha with a group called the Four Evers, which was a great doo-wop group, and their lead singer did have a good falsetto. So they did that song "Be My Girl," which really had a Four Seasons sound to it, and you arranged that. Do you recall that at all?
Yeah. I thought that record could have been a hit.
Well, it was a hit in New York City, but
not as big. Yeah, it could have been. I thought it could have been at least a
lot bigger.
Yeah, a lot
bigger.
bigger.
I heard, and I don't know if this is true, but I heard these rumors that Tommy DeVito and Nick Massey were very upset that Frankie and I guess you had gone over and done this other record because they thought that should have been a four-season record, and that they sort of put pressure on disc jockeys not to play it. I have no idea if that's true or just some wild rumor. But
first of all, as far as the writing of the songs were concerned, Nicky and Tommy had really no input into the writing of the songs.
Right,
and the song was not written by Gaudio or Bob Crewe. It was a song, I forget who wrote it, but it was not written by anybody associated with the Four Seasons. Now, here's a little bit more information.
Gaudio is credited, isn't he?
He may have written it with Al Kasha.
Well, somebody I just saw this on Facebook. The lead singer of the Four Evers was Joey DiBenedetto.
Right.
A relative of Joey Benedetto says that the song was actually written by his father and an uncle or someone. You know, no one's, Gaudio is credited as the writer. I don't know.
During that same period of time, Al Cash's brother, who was a Broadway producer, produced a movie with Sal Mineo.
Yeah.
And Al Cash asked me to do the score, and
Killed
there were
Teddy.
songs in it.
Yeah.
So naturally, I introduced Al Cascia to Bob Gaudio. So
Yeah.
Bob Gaudio got involved with Cascia to write the songs for that movie.
Yeah.
Now, while they were writing that movie, they could have written the other side. I really don't remember. But also the fact that Gaudio got involved. Back then, we used to go back and forth to New York. Frankie probably came to the session when I was recording and doing the vocals and sang on the record.
Right. That's
So,
exactly.
so
Yeah.
as a result of it, he got himself on the record. But it wasn't something that we actually planned.
No, no.
Okay. Now this was for the movie Who Killed Teddy Bear?
Yeah.
Okay. Got it.
But the songs that we did with the Forevers were not for that movie.
Okay.
There were other songs that I put them together so that they could write together.
Okay.
Eventually, Al won the Academy Award for writing
Morning.
The Morning
Morning.
After.
Yeah, from Poseidon Adventure.
Yeah.
Actually, when you were at Columbia, the Forever's career it never resurrected after Be My Girl. And but when you were at Columbia, you actually did sign them, and they did another Gaudio song, "Walking Out of the Crowd," something like that. It was a Gaudio Linzer song. "I'm Walking Out of the Crowd." They recorded that with you at Columbia.
Well, you have a lot of knowledge of that stuff.
Oh,
Amazing.
Anthony Colatrella knows everything.
So how do you make a living with all this knowledge?
I'm retired. I'll make a living.
He shares the knowledge, and we are so thankful to Anthony with everything he knows. He's
So-
a walking encyclopedia.
Let me ask you a question, Anthony. When did you get started being a Four Seasons fan?
It was August of 1962. I was in Belleville, New Jersey, in my backyard cutting grass on a hot summer day. I went inside to cool off, and I turned on the radio, and I heard this fantastic sound. Sherry. I said, "Oh my God, what is that?" And that was I've been a
Now-
Four Seasons fan ever since.
So you followed it pretty closely, and it looks like you followed the people that were associated with.
Yep. Everything about the Four Seasons I followed. Anything
Yeah,
about them.
Yeah, every now and then I run into somebody who has that kind of knowledge, and I'll get or somebody will send me an email saying, "Do you remember making this record?" And I'll listen to it, and I don't remember the record, and I feel really embarrassed. But then I hear something that I wrote, say, "I remember writing that."
Yeah.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
to have the ability to be able to remember that stuff is really, really amazing.
Yeah. And Anthony is one of our first generation fans, and I'm what you'd consider a second generation fan. I didn't get into the band till 1972 when I purchased their Chameleon album at 12 years old, and that did it for me.
Wow.
That did it. I have,
Wow.
I've been to several concerts, taken 3 generations, my mom, myself, my grandkids, just huge fan of the band. And Charlie Calello, it is an honor, and we thank you for your time. Mr. Calello, again, one of the great arrangers in music with over 100 of his records have made the Billboard charts, 38 top 10. And Charlie, this book that you wrote, I don't know if it can be seen, Another Season. It is just a great book. My daughter got me this copy when it first came out. I've read it twice, and I cannot thank you and Mr. Tom Austin enough for putting it together. Just thank you so much. Thank you.
Before I go, I'm going to do one thing here. Let me see.
Yeah, Charlie, do you still perform? I know you used to go out and perform with a band, and you would do your hits. Do you still do that?
The last time I did one show this year. Hold on one second. I'm looking
Yeah.
looking for something. Let me see if I can find this. Let me see.
Yep.
No, I can't find it. And anyway, I was doing it for a while. I did one concert last year where I do the hits. I have a 2-hour show where I tell stories about the records that I perform. I have two great singers. I used Joe Leo Bueri, who played Frankie Valli on Broadway and also did the touring show, and a great female singer. And I have the most fun doing that. But this year I'm going to be 87.
Yeah.
And the thought of me going on a road or packing up to go do a show, I mean, it's a lot to do. So I may do one this year. I'm not sure, but I won't do more than one or even two.
Okay, well, if you do, we want to wish you the best. We know you just celebrated a birthday back in August of last year, this past summer. And any closing comments, Anthony?
No, besides all his many talents and attributes, Charlie is also a great guy, a real gentleman. I have to say that.
And I will agree. And Charlie, thank you for your time. You have no idea what it means to me. I was just so excited when you accepted the invitation to come on my YouTube channel. I'll let you know when this is posted. But many thanks. And again, I am in just complete awe of your career. Complete awe.
Thank you. And it was a pleasure. I enjoyed it.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, guys.
Thank you, Charlie. Take care.